How to Rum. Moonshine Life Recipes. Recipe for homemade rum with cane sugar or molasses. Ingredients: brown cane sugar or molasses 5 kilos. Water 20 to 25 liters. Yeast distillation or wine yeast. About yields. Depending on the characteristics of the production, the sugar content in molasses varies between 30 and 73%, usually 50%. Knowing this index allows you to estimate the distillate yield. 1 kilo of cane sugar yields up to 1.2 liters of rum, 80 proof. 1 kilo of molasses, 50%, produces up to 600 milliliters of 80 proof liquor. In practice, the amount of rum is always less than the theoretical 8–15% for sugar and 15 to 25% for molasses. Not all the sugars, especially caramel, in molasses can be converted by yeast into alcohol. This is why, in most cases, molasses remains sweet even after fermentation has finished. Note that you can't use the main sign that the wash is ready, the absence of a sweet taste. Making rum with cane sugar is much easier, and the actual process is no different from making moonshine. You can also mix sugar and molasses, as this will increase the yield and maintain organoleptic properties. It's important to add the right amount of water. The total sugar content of the wash should not exceed 20%. Homemade rum recipe. Calculate the main washing indicators. You will need 5 liters of water per 1 kilo of molasses and 10 grams of dry yeast or 50 grams of pressed yeast. The ideal ratio for cane sugar is 1:4 liters of water per 1 kilogram of sugar and 20 grams dry, 100 grams of baker's yeast. These proportions were taken directly from the Cuban recipe, which also uses twice as much yeast for molasses as for sugar. The prolonged fermentation of molasses affects the smell and taste of rum in a positive way. Water in a pot. Dilute the sugar or molasses in boiling water and stir until smooth. Cover the pot with a lid and leave for 30 minutes. After that, decant into a fermentation container. Dilute yeast according to the instructions. You can use the rum wash obtained in the previous step as yeast food, but cool it down to 25–28 degrees C. Pour the second half of the water into the wash cold, uncooked water. Stir and check the temperature, it should be below 30 degrees Celsius. Add the diluted yeast. Stir once more. Get out at least 10–15% of the empty volume of foam and carbon dioxide. Install an airlock in the neck of the container. Transfer the wash to a dark place or cover with a temperature of 18 to 28 degrees Celsius. It is washed with pure cane yeast for 5 to 10 days. After that, it is no longer sweet and the airlock no longer emits gas. The empty gloves. This means you can go on to the next step. Often, washing molasses remains sweet even after fermentation has finished, because the yeasts cannot convert it into caramelized sugar. The only way to tell if fermentation is finished is to check the airlock. If there's no gas coming out, you're good to go. I suggest starting distillation no earlier than 12 to 15 days after adding the ingredients. Decant the fermented wash to remove solid particles, which can burn during distillation. Distilled for the first time in a usual distillation without separating the yield into fractions. Stop collecting the distillate once it has less than 20% ABV. Do not discharge the contents of the distillate. Determine the ABV and the amount of pure alcohol in the sugar cane spirit obtained. Total quantity. Volume times the ABV percentage and divide by 100. Calculate the amount of water needed to dilute the moonshine to 20 degrees. Add 75% of the calculated value. Replace 25% of the water with the liquid content of the distillery. This will greatly improve the taste of the final drink and add slight hints of sweetness. Distill the diluted moonshine a second time. Collect the first 12–15% of the yield separately. These heads are harmful and should not be consumed. Collect the main product until the ABV drops below 45%. The distillate obtained is ready to be consumed as a white rum. At this stage, the preparation process can be stopped. Now all you have to do is dilute the drink with water to 40 to 45%, bottle and close and leave for 3 to 4 days to let the taste stabilize. Unaged white rum. If you want to make golden or dark rum, after all, you'll have to add caramel or age the distillate in barrels or with oak chips. The most chaste way to shade your homemade rum is to use a homemade sugar colorant. Cane sugar is the preferred ingredient for making caramel. It's important to taste the rum during aging. If you're using a barrel, do this at least once a month. If you're using oak chips, at least once every 5 days. Bottle the drink immediately after you notice hints of tanning. Otherwise, you risk ending up with a drink that tastes like a swept floor. The infusion time with oak chips depends on the individual properties of the wood, soaking and roasting. This can take a few weeks or up to 6 months. I recommend only pan